So, Martin Pollecoff.
Hi, John.
Thanks for talking to me today.
It's okay. Always a pleasure.
You're a psychotherapist, and
I am a psychotherapist
with a private practice here in West London.
I'm a private practice here in West London. I'm an honorary psychotherapist with the NHS in the Soho clinic in Soho.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
So I do work 1 day a week in the NHS.
Okay, right.
Okay.
I'd just be interested to know a little bit about your background and how you came to be doing this work.
Well, I came through, when I was 27, I joined a group of people who created exegesis in the UK.
And what's that?
It was England's Est.
Oh, okay.
It's the UK Est.
Okay.
It was a training company, so I really started off there in consciousness work, which is what it was.
Okay.
I didn't become a psychotherapist until I was about, in my 40s I trained there.
Oh, right.
Right?
So you were basically like, is this like management training or?
No, before that it was a consciousness training.
Okay.
It was called a large room trainings. You know, you do 50, 100 people at a time going through a process, basically. It's a process.
Designed to do what? What was the outcome?
The outcome was to give them what they wanted on the way in. I hate to be so obtuse on this, but they say it's a process in which you look at self and make new decisions about your life.
Okay.
Like any therapy,
Okay.
you're always looking at self and saying, actually, given what I've learned, is it true what I thought was true, etc. You re-examine things, and you're looking at your own consciousness.
All right. Well, that's an interesting expression you use, looking at self.
Yes.
Of course, in voice dialogue we say looking at selves, don't we? We kind of talk about the multiplicity.
Yeah, but the multiplicity is also, it's a concert as well. It comes out in one voice at the end of the day. I mean, you wouldn't say, I know lots of Johns.
Okay.
You say, I know John, and he's formed of all these different parts.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's the way I would look at it anyway.
Okay. Great.
So that, we come forward as a self, but internally there's a lot of voices discussing things. Now, by voices I don't mean voices as in from the outside. They're very familiar things. They're the part of you that says, I really want another biscuit, another part that says, oh, come on, you shouldn't. Those sort of selves.
Okay.
They're different. Right?
Okay. Right.
Okay.
So exegesis was the name? Exegesis. Okay.
Yeah.
And you worked with that for a number of years?
Exegesis I worked for 5 to 7 years, and I worked 21 years with that group of people.
Okay.
So it's a what's now called a psycho-spiritual community.
Oh, okay. Great.
Okay, and a business.
Okay. And how did you then transition into kind of mainstream psychotherapy from there in your 40s?
Well, I was working as a what was then called a change agent. I have a master's degree from Surrey University in change, which is a weird thing to get a master's degree in, but that was what was they then called the humanistic psychology department.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was a behaviourist psychology department called psychology, and that's by the science group, so they couldn't call it that.
Okay.
It's complex, but it's an academic nicety.
Okay.
And it was run by people like John Heron started that off, and very interesting people, quite an interesting thing. But when I finished, we sold the company we'd built. When I finished there, I continued as a management consultant for a couple of years, but I wanted to transition to working, as I used to do, one-to-one with people. Okay. That's what I really wanted to do.
Okay.
And by this time, you really needed proper qualifications. You couldn't just wing it.
Yeah.
As you used to
in the old days.
In the old days. So I took a master's degree at Metanoia and did that. But in the meantime, and I'm UKCP registered, but a 5-year course.
Right.
In the meantime, I'd been married again, and my wife knew Helen Sidra. Getting married in your 40s is not like getting married when you're 20. It's different. You both of you are quite set in your ways, and your things you like, things you don't like. And we were having issues, so we thought, well, let's go and talk to these guys. These were supposed to be the world's experts in relationship.
Okay.
I'd never met them.
Right.
And this was in 95 or 6.
Okay.
And we went over there to do some work for ourselves.
Okay.
And I thought, this is really good. There's 2 things I thought was because I could work with Hal. It was fun. I'd done psychotherapy before, and I've been in therapy, and I've done different bits of therapy all the way through my life. But he was much more fun. And
Okay.
Hal and Sidra, because I always consider them as a partnership, were fun to work with and
Right.
stuff. It was non-pathological, which means that I wasn't being blamed, it wasn't bad. There was no illness there.
That's an important point about voice dialogue, isn't it? You don't pathologise people with...
No, there's no labels there.
Right.
They haven't done anything wrong.
Yes.
They may have missed the point a few times, but that's about as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
So where you might get a label, a really serious psychological label, if you go into a medical situation, this, just going back on that, the medical labels are really cute, but there's no cures.
It's just labelling.
It's just labelling.
Okay.
And that, you can have some pills, this, that and the other, but in reality, that's not very useful. So psychotherapy doesn't use that very much.
Okay.
They might do in a hospital. In a hospital, I'll be working with people who have got labels.
Okay.
But normally you wouldn't bother with that.
Okay.
It's not important because the flow or the way of psychotherapy and the way of voice dialogue is a process. It's not a matter of changing the process for every person that comes along.
So how would you describe that process? What's that process all about?
In voice dialogue?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you've got to come into voice dialogue. You've got to want to do it.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, you want to do it because something's dissatisfying to you.
Right.
Very few people come along and say, my life is perfect, or I'm so happy every day that I want to do some sort of therapy.
Okay.
So the way people come into it is through a presenting issue.
Right.
As they'd say in psychotherapy. They come with, look, I'm upset, or my wife's left me, I'm going to divorce and things. Very important life changes. And that's normally why they come. They come with an issue, but then they learn a technique or a way of handling it themselves.
Okay.
So-
Is that different from regular therapy?
Yes, it is different from regular therapy.
How would you describe that difference from your
Well,
personal experience?
Well, first of all, in my working, sometimes I use voice dialogue and sometimes I don't.
Right.
It's not appropriate for every single client. It's not appropriate for everybody.
Right.
But some people who want to go and find a way, it's also a way of consciousness, not necessarily of psychology.
So say a bit more about that. That's really
Okay.
interesting.
It is what would now be called a transpersonal therapy, because it's more than just self. It's yourself in the world. It's
Okay.
yourself in relationship.
Right.
So you're using all the outside parts of your life to learn about yourself.
Okay.
So you're not there because you're ill or you're in trouble. That's how it may start.
Right.
But the presenting issue of any therapy is the most important thing, because it involves you in overcoming your natural narcissism and egocentricity and saying, actually, I don't know what to do here.
Okay.
Now, you can go and buy a book, but that isn't the same. It's not the same as going to somebody and saying, look, I do not know, and I think you might have a clue of how to get here.
Okay.
Now, the therapist doesn't have a clue of how you should do things,
Right.
but he or she knows a process that you can use,
Okay.
and will teach you that process.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, even in a psychotherapy, at the end of the day, they go away. It finishes at a time.
Yeah. Sure.
Right, and they go away having learnt something about themselves and how to do something themselves. If it works, they've internalised the work of the therapist,
Okay.
and they can do it themselves a lot.
So how does that then work with voice dialogue?
Well, you come along with an issue, and you have no idea about voice dialogue. So then, in voice dialogue, you're starting to not just look at the issue, but look at those parts of yourself that are dealing with the issue,
Okay.
and parts that can help you with the issue.
Okay.
So the facilitator is literally that, a facilitator. He or she is not telling you what to do. He or she is taking you through a process.
Right.
Now, I've never met a voice dialogue facilitator that will shut up, but they don't need to.
Right.
They don't need to do very much,
Okay.
because they're pointing out. They're just pointing you in a way.
So it's like a little mantra I use when I'm teaching. The work is facilitate, don't fix.
Yeah,
That kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all psychotherapy, or best ones, don't fix stuff.
Right. Okay.
But this one teaches how to use your own thoughts and feelings,
Okay.
to use the people in your life, your thoughts and feelings about them, to really bring yourself back into kilter with your world as it is at this time.
Okay.
There's no norm here,
Right.
because the world is always changing,
Yeah.
and you are always adapting, which is why you've got these cells. You're
Okay.
always able to adapt to that changing world.
So this is what the cells do for us. They help us to adapt to circumstances in our changing circumstances.
Yes.
Circumstances in our lives.
Yeah, the changing world.
Okay, Martin, I've heard you use this word telic a number of times, and
Okay.
could you explain that a bit? A lot of people, I didn't know what it meant before I heard you say it, and a lot of people have mentioned it too.
Well, telic is normally, telic means a predictive quality.
Okay.
So one of the things about voice dialogue
Mhm.
is the nature of dreams and voice dialogue.
Right.
Now, voice dialogue has certain assumptions, and one of the assumptions, certainly Hal has in
Mhm.
using it, and Sidra has, is that the unconscious brings up telic images, i.e. the images that bring you towards health
Mm-hmm.
if you know how to, what they are, and if you know how to interact with those images,
Okay.
you get advice from it. I.e., dreams are not just some garbage that goes on at night. It's not just a random downloading.
So there's like a message encoded in the dream, as it were.
Well, there is encoded in the dream, but the dream, at the same time, having said they're not just nonsense, they are nonsense
Mhm.
until you sit down with them and bring consciousness to unconscious material.
Okay.
So when those two come together, when you
Mhm.
start to examine them, you get something else.
Okay.
So mainly with dreams, people are frightened that their dreams will be ridiculed or will be bad dreams or kind of, because a dream is the only true art form of the unconscious. It's what it creates.
It's an interesting description of dreams.
Well, it is pure. You can't consciously dream. People try and consciously dream.
Right.
It's the unconscious description of a world, and that's a fascinating thing in itself.
And what I'm hearing you say, that telic, then you're saying that the
Yeah.
art form that
Yeah.
the unconscious creates has a purpose to it.
It has a purpose
For
yes.
that individual who's having that dream.
Absolutely.
And voice dialogue can be one of many tools that help people understand what that purpose is.
It's a very easy and democratic way of involving yourself with unconscious material.
Democratic, what do
By
you mean?
democratic, I mean it doesn't have any long jargonistic words.
Okay.
Right? You don't have to learn Latin to mess with this,
Yes,
right?
Right.
You are not being told what the dream is by this great doctor or great person not telling you, not interpreting the dreams for you. You are wrestling with your own unconscious material.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
And somebody facilitating the process, who's been through the process many times before, and who knows the process, not what's going to come out. Because it's always surprising.
Yeah. Right.
And by democratic, I also mean that. Hal and Sidra are both clinical psychologists.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
Hal is also an analyst, a Jungian analyst,
Right.
trained in Zurich.
Right.
He's trained in the hospitals, he's
Yeah.
trained in the army.
Mhm.
He's highly, highly trained,
Right.
as is Sidra.
Yes.
Right? But here is something that anybody can pick up. They've
Mhm.
created something that simplifies the process that anybody can pick up and work on for themselves. You don't
Okay.
have to spend 10 years, 20 years in training.
So it's a very accessible tool.
Very accessible, and that's why
Okay.
I'd say it's democratic, because the power struggle between the therapist, the
Yes.
great therapist, and the poor patient
Yeah.
isn't in this,
Okay.
right? It's a
Okay.
much more level playing field in
Right.
which somebody's teaching or facilitating a process which you learn how to do yourself, a way that you can keep going yourself. You gain something
Right.
from this. It's a psychoeducation.
A psychoeducation.
Yeah, right. A proper word, but that's it.
Great.
Psychoeducation.
Great.
Okay.
Fabulous. Thank you, Martin. That was very provocative.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.